Three American animals that would destroy European ecosystems. Like, it is, I find it really interesting how just by introducing an animal into a new ecosystem, that animal can just wreak complete havoc, change basically everything about it. Like, especially if it's maybe like a big or a bigger type of animal than the ones that are native to the area. It's just insane. Like, I remember hearing about a frog, I think the Simpsons did a parody of the story. I think a frog was introduced to Australia and it just completely decimated like massive amounts of farmland.
Ecosystem where it doesn't belong. That ecosystem usually suffers massive negative impacts. Introduced species can hunt and compete with native species,
Is that a cat?
and they can also alter habitats and cause damage to infrastructure and farming. This is of course not the animal's fault, as they are simply trying to survive, and in the vast majority of cases humans are behind their introduction. All continents around the world are affected by invasive species, but in today's video I will be focusing on just two continents, North America and Europe. These two continents are home to a vast array of
Wow, what is that? Is that like a buffalo of some kind? I've never seen this animal before.
wildlife, and in some cases they even share some wildlife. Certain species can be found in both North America and Europe, with some great examples being the moose, the northern pike, the red fox, and the brown bear. As well as this, both continents seem to have animals that are very similar to each other, such as the American and European bison, the North American and Eurasian beaver, and the North American and Eurasian otters. Even though the North American and European ecosystems can be quite similar, they are still both home to unique species that could cause problems if they were introduced outside of their native range. There are already plenty of North American creatures that are invasive in Europe, such as the North American beaver, the American mink, the signal crayfish, and the raccoon. Of course, this also works the other way
So
around.
the raccoon wasn't native to the entirety of Europe. I would have thought at least one country would have had raccoons in Europe before the American ones came over.
As there are plenty of European creatures that are invasive in North America. Some great examples are the common starling, the European green crab, the zebra mussel, and the brown trout. In this video I won't be focusing on creatures that are already invasive, but instead I will be focusing on certain North American creatures that could cause major problems in Europe. I think certain North American animals would be able to take advantage of weaknesses in
Is
the
that a mountain lion? Such a cool looking animal.
European ecosystem,
Huge
and if they
cat.
were introduced they would cause major problems. The first North American creature we will be
Wolf.
taking a look at is the coyote.
Coyote.
Coyotes are among the most iconic North American mammals, but today in some areas they're seen as a pest. Just like many other intelligent canines, coyotes do very well in urban areas. They can live right under our noses in suburbs and cities, and every major city in the US has a coyote population.
Wow.
They are often seen
Every single major city in the US has coyotes.
as a negative animal to have around, as they will eat garbage and eat pets. But in more rural areas they are a positive creature to have around. They will hunt certain creatures that are seen as pests such as rodents and insects, and they will also hunt more dangerous creatures such as venomous snakes. Coyotes in rural areas are also more shy than coyotes in cities, so they tend to cause less problems. The reason I think coyotes would do so well in Europe is simply because they're so intelligent and adaptable. They could easily live in and around certain European cities, and in these areas they would have little competition. One animal that could stand in their way is the red fox, but this fox is also found in their native North America. When these two species
I think the coyote looks a little bit bigger than the fox, so that could be a problem.
meet in the wild, it can get quite ugly, and the coyotes usually displace or kill the foxes. Currently, quite a few red foxes inhabit large European cities, and if coyotes were introduced into Europe, they would displace them. In their native North America, coyotes have quite a few predators to keep their numbers under control, and luckily quite a few of these predators can also be found in Europe. Golden eagles, wolves, and bears would hunt coyotes in Europe.
A golden eagle can hunt a coyote? How big do golden eagles get? I mean, because a coyote looks like a pretty big animal, like it's a fairly, large or, average sized dog. Like, how on earth would an eagle be able to pick one up?
Europe. But of course, most of these predators rarely enter cities. This is why I believe they could cause such big problems in European cities. And the raccoon has already proved that North American animals can survive in European cities. The coyote might come into trouble in southeastern Europe, because this is where you can find the golden jackal. This canid is very similar in size and appearance to the coyote, and it would get into a very fierce battle competing with it. So if the coyote was introduced into Europe, I think it would cause major problems. But of course, it would be extremely unlikely for anyone to try and release this animal outside of its native range. The next North American animal we will be taking a look at is the largemouth bass. The largemouth bass is a carnivorous freshwater game fish, and it's extremely popular with fishermen. It's extremely aggressive and will put up a good fight, and this is one of the main reasons why it's been introduced into many countries around the world.
Looks a bit like a piranha, just doesn't have the sharp teeth.
The largemouth bass is famously one of the worst invasive fish in the world, and it's even responsible for some extinctions. They've been blamed for the extinction of the Atitlan grebe in Guatemala, and they've been blamed for the extinction of some small cyprinids in Japan. When you compare the ecosystems of North America and Europe, you can find the most difference in the freshwater ecosystems. North America and Europe share a few freshwater species, but North America has far more predatory fish. There are many different species of trout and sunfish, and there are even more prehistoric species such as the gars and bowfin. Europe has its own predatory fish such as perch, pike and zander, and even giants such as large...
Is that a catfish? Look at the size, like, it almost looks like a mustache.
catfish and sturgeon. Despite this, there are far less predatory fish in European waters as there are in North American waters.
I wonder why the fish in American waters evolved to be predatory. Like, there must be a reason for it. You know, is it like the survival was typically harder in those waters, so they had to evolve to eat other fish, or...
And this is why the largemouth bass would be such a success in European waters. Strangely, this fish's inclusion on this list is not hypothetical, as it has already been introduced into Europe. Today it's by no means widespread, but it can be found over large areas of Portugal and Spain, which are the two countries that are home to the most invasive fish in Europe.
Who introduced them though? Like, I mean, it should be like unless it's for like a specific scientific reason, unless they're needed there.
As they face little competition, they are spreading at an alarming rate, and many European countries have now been put on alert. So unfortunately, this fish's introduction into Europe is not hypothetical, and hopefully it doesn't spread much further. The final North American animal we will be taking a look at is unsurprisingly the American alligator. This giant crocodilian is native to the southeastern United States, and it's one of just 2 species in its genus. The other is the much smaller Chinese alligator, and this species is also a lot rarer.
Man, honestly, it looks like a dinosaur, doesn't it? It looks like something from Jurassic Park. It's the closest thing we have to dinosaurs. Just look at it. Wow.
The American alligator is one of the largest native reptiles in North America, but strangely it also has to battle invasive species. Florida is one of the worst affected areas when it comes to invasive species, and this means that the American alligator has a lot of predators to compete with. In recent years it's had to battle Burmese pythons and caiman, but luckily it usually comes out on top. As the American alligator is the apex predator of its ecosystem, it would
How big is an alligator, typical alligator, compared to a crocodile? Like, are they about the same size? I always thought crocodiles were bigger than alligators, but this one looks pretty big.
Certainly cause problems elsewhere. There's no doubt that it would prey on native European species, but the real question is if it would be able to survive in Europe. Even though alligators can survive cold snaps, they need warm weather throughout most of the year. This is why they're limited to mostly the southern states, and this means that they wouldn't be able to survive in most of Europe. Famously, Europe is one of the few continents without any native crocodilians, but there are a few places where they could survive. There are a few warmer wetlands in Spain and Italy, and the American alligator would be quite happy in these areas. They would have plenty of fish to feed on, such as the aforementioned Wells catfish, and they would also feed on many of the native semi-aquatic mammals.
I suppose they could also feed on the what was that fish from before? The the largemouth bass, potentially,
Of course, their young
if
would
it was introduced.
be taken out by some predators, but once they reach a certain size, nothing would be able to take them down. They could become the masters of southern European wetlands, but luckily they wouldn't be able to spread very far north. The only feasible way for an American alligator to make its way to
Oh, so cute.
Europe is through the pet trade, and thankfully they are illegal to keep in most European countries. This hopefully means that they will never make their way to Europe, because if they did, they would certainly take over some freshwater ecosystems. If you think there's any other North American animals that could have made it in this video, then let me know down in the
Great video. Found that really interesting. I would have never thought like the largemouth bass was such a problem. Like it sounds like it just dominates, you know, the waters that it's found in. Like the alligator, like, yeah, again, because it's so big, I can't think of any animals, any like water-based animals that could really take it on if it was introduced here, like a shark maybe, but I don't think they're found in the same waters. Yeah, it would just straight up dominate. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.